Allyn Evans, you are the CEO of the Monroe Institute. You have been a residential trainer there since 2010. You're an author, a speaker, and a Reiki Master Teacher. Your work has been featured on Gaia and Amazon Prime. Thank you so much for joining today. It really is great to have you on.
It's great to be here.
You know what? I'm so glad that we're here talking about the Monroe Institute today because I was first told about the Monroe Institute by a man named Paul H. Smith. And he
Okay.
was part of the Stargate program. And there is a mystique around the Monroe Institute just because of that, because it's got the connection to the Stargate program, which was if people don't know now, it was the CIA study into psychic and ESP that started way back in the 70s. And then there was even a document information that was released about the Monroe Institute from the CIA back in, I guess, 2003 that was going through the gateway process too. So it's very, very interesting, the Monroe Institute. We've got you here today to really explain, unveil some of the mystery behind this. And I guess my first question is to you is, what is the Monroe Institute?
Before I answer that, I want to go back to what you were
Hmm.
just saying, because with Stargate, that was more about remote viewing, and we
Right.
still have Joe McMonagle here as a trainer, and he
Yeah.
was remote viewer 001 in that project. And the other thing is, it was the CIA released the paper. It was actually a paper written by an Army colonel who came to a gateway, and it was his own impressions and own thoughts around the experience, and basically a report to his superior. So
It,
but it's interesting. It's definitely interesting, and it's caught a lot of people's attention.
Yeah,
But
and especially the younger audience too, because this is how they found out about the Gateway experience, and it was released, and it's people want to dive into it more, and we hear so much about remote viewing these days, and Joe McMonagle is a legend, and he's still teaching there now. So there's so much around this institute that I've heard you say this before. It's like Professor Xavier's School for the Gifted.
right, Hogwarts,
Yeah,
Hogwarts.
yeah. Hogwarts is Hogwarts. So tell us, but what is the Monroe Institute?
So it was started by Bob Monroe, and he was this guy, just this regular businessman who it was into radio, who started having these spontaneous out of body experiences. And so this just made him very, well, first it scared him. He thought he was going crazy. And he went to friends of his that were doctors and psychiatrists and psychologists to say, hey, what's going on here? They all examined him. They all said, no, Bob, you're not crazy. This is just some phenomena you're experiencing. So then he settled into it and said, well, okay, I'm having these experiences. I'm going to start, not fighting them, not being afraid of them, and just journal them. And so he ended up journaling all of that. That's how those books were written. It's all based on his, personal experiences. So because of his curiosity and wanting to find out more about this, he started an organization, and he shifted his what was at the time radio team into doing sleep research when people were asleep. Like he wanted to see if people could learn while they sleep. And so he shifted his interest from radio to trying to do this. And then they discovered that during the process of getting people to go to sleep, they were having trouble for people falling asleep. So they were like, okay, what do we do? And he'd been working with sound in the radio business. So he started tampering with that to help induce sleep. And then these interesting things started happening, and he was a guinea pig. And so when we say spontaneous out of bodies, I hypothesize that what he was doing with the technology was part of what helped him, launch into having those experiences. But of course, that made him very curious. He wanted to know more, and so he was trying to set up a way to help people have these experiences.
There's so much that we know about frequencies now, that how they're so interconnected with the human body. And
Mhm.
he's the one that uncovered all this. And there's, that thing called the binaural beats, and we'll get into that later. But, I want to kind of focus a little bit more around the history of Bob Monroe, because he's such, interesting guy, and has so much basis in kind of I guess, the extrasensory perception, the psychic world here in the U.S. He originally it was Andrea Polhoric who actually introduced him. It kind of gave him more exposure, right?
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, so early on, Andrei Polhorak, who is a very famous psychic researcher, and he's the person that actually brought Uri Geller and put Uri Geller on the scene, and he wrote several books, and he actually published some articles about Robert Monroe, and they worked together in doing the research early on. So I know that they've got some strong foundation, in his work and research, behind a lot
Right.
of the technology here.
Yeah, he
So
wanted to make sure that there was research behind it, and he did everything he could to stay away from woo-woo, what he called woo-woo. Well, I don't know if he called it that, what we would call woo-woo language.
we love woo woo though here. So we want more woo
But,
woo. All we
but
do is talk about woo woo on this channel,
But
but
he
link
was
it back
trying
to
to, yeah,
science.
he wanted to get it, a rigor to it, and so that scientists, could be looking at it and coming up with explanations of, why this is happening. So that's why he started with the explorers, the volunteers that he had, that they were running these experiments, and it was more experiential or subjective because you're just getting the experience of the person in the, in the using the technology and experiencing those deep meditations.
So let's get more into the OBE. We call it out of body experiences because this is something that Robert Monroe kind of stumbled on. So
Mhm.
explain what that is and how someone knows that they're actually
Uh-huh.
doing an out of body experience because from the outsider it just seems like are you just imagining something or maybe you just might be lucid dreaming. But how would you explain it to a complete layman?
Right. So it's interesting because so many of us have defined it as being out of the body. That's the term. That's the way Bob saw it. There are others who theorize it's more about being, still in the body. It's not like we're trying to get our energetic body, out of it. It's an experience that can be totally, in-house, in the body experience that can be an out-of-body experience because of projected consciousness. But it's interesting. Have you had an out-of-body experience before?
I see. I can't say that I have had an out of body experience, but I've got a very vivid imagination. I do a lot
Okay.
of meditating. I
Yeah.
don't know if I'm just imagining I'm over the ocean or in space,
Yeah. Well,
but
so it's interesting
so I want
because
to know what's
it's
the
hard.
difference.
Yeah, it's hard to articulate it because we each experience things in our own way. That's why the beauty of what we do here is we say, "You go find out. You go have the experience, and then tell me." But based on what I've experienced, it's a very clear difference between a lucid dream and an out-of-body experience. And again, it's really hard to describe why and how I perceive those differences. A lot of people will use stepping into a lucid dreaming state to move to an out of body state. And I've used that technique before very successfully. And so maybe that's why I have a more clear definition of how I perceive it because of that experience. But when you're in a lucid dream, it's still more like being in a dream world. And so it's about the self, the total self, where it's like if you see characters in a dream, those are usually meaningful for you in self-evolution, in interacting with aspects of yourself. When you get to out of body, that's a whole new stage, and it's separate from self, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense, but I want to get a little cl more clarity on around that. So when you're actually in that state, can you still feel your physical body, or do you feel completely detached? I mean, I don't, if so, I don't feel my
Yeah.
surroundings. If there was light on me, I don't feel it.
Right. I would say you tend to be that way more because you are not focused on the physical body. And the minute you focus on the physical body, like, oh, I need to go to the bathroom, let's say Bob talked about that in his books a lot, then that's, bringing that all back to your physical awareness. Um, yeah. So
Because when Joe McMonagle explains it, and he talks about like literally the feeling he got the first time he went like through a roof and realizing and seeing the colors and experiencing that like like it was so vivid.
it
So it,
is.
may- it
Oh,
so
I'm
it is
sorry.
it is vivid like that you're saying.
Yeah. But some people experience lucid dreams very vividly, so that's why I wouldn't necessarily use that as a definition. But if you have a traditional or out of body, then that's where you have the perception that you are like energetically coming out of your body. I remember I looked at journals in previous months because I've been writing a book. I described it as coming out of my shoulder, And then also I had this desire to see my body in the bed, like the story of Bob Monroe, the first one he had. He finds himself on the ceiling next to the chandelier, doesn't really understand what's happening. He looks down and he sees this man in bed with his wife. Well, it was him, that was in bed with his wife, his body, but he had, he was just apart from that, or his consciousness was apart from it. So that's if you're having a traditional experience, that's when it's, I think, easier to know you're having an out of body because you have those perceptions of, okay, I'm energetically moving, I can see my body, and then what do I do next? And you make an intention to go out or do something, to go somewhere, and then those things unfold for you.
See, it's very interesting because when we're taught these different meditative practices, you're imagining yourself, above your house, you're imagining yourself maybe in the air, you're imagining yourself in space, in the sun, and you're looking down. So I wouldn't say that those are, out of body experiences. I think it's a fake kind of. You're wishing you were having one. So that's why it's very interesting to hear, you clarify this because, to the outsider listening in, they go, this all sounds crazy. All this stuff
Yeah.
can't be true, but this is why, even this research that the CIA did on this all those years ago it gives it even more validity to it because it was done early in the 70s. They
Right.
heard about this going and they put money into this to actually, see what was there and anybody can go look at those documents. It was released in 2003. They did
Mhm.
this research now 40 years ago. So it's really, really interesting stuff. One thing that we love to talk about here, and it's what draws me to the Monroe Institute the most, is that, it's all about exploring consciousness, right?
Mhm.
It says right on your page there, it says its purpose is advancing the global awakening of human consciousness.
Yeah.
So, what I want to ask you is, in the Monroe Institute's point of view, what is consciousness?
So that's a very good question because if you were asking a neurosurgeon or a neuroscientist or a psychologist or a mystical teacher, it'd be totally different answers. And if we're looking at it through the Monroe model, I would say that it's very basic. It starts with conscious awareness in this physical reality. So we are aware, we are living what Bob called this Earth life system. So we think, we plan, we take action, we react. And so that would be what he would call C1 consciousness. Then we can move to other states of consciousness. And we've already been talking about this with the dream state. So the dream state is one of them. Subconscious mind is another. And just think about your childhood, your cultural beliefs, all these things drive you through your subconscious mind that you're not even consciously aware of. And so Monroe, the model that was created by Bob, helps us delve into that and start having these communications with that part of ourselves. Same with dream states, same kind of thing. Then we can move to expanded states of awareness, where we're into nonlinear types of experiences, and that's the OBs, the out of body, remote viewing, the lucid dreaming, when we're in those deep meditative states with projected consciousness. So, that's where we're dealing with that. Then we can go beyond that to transcendence, where some people talk about it like connection with God, connection with source, connection with the universe, or connected with all things, all life, all experiences. And then we can go beyond that, which we do at Monroe with our Starlines program, where it's beyond human, beyond human consciousness or understanding, where we're getting into more of that cosmology and things we really don't understand, but we can tap into, through the exploration of space.
So it's really interesting the way that you explain the different levels of consciousness because when you look at something like you say the OBEs and then also the remote viewing, it gives us this idea that we're all connected. There's some sort of layer of connection between all people. So it did Robert Monroe or maybe you guys there at the Monroe Institute come across any sort of hypothesis as to a linking thing between all people that makes all of this possible, like
I would
time or
I
or
would say
something.
no. Our focus is on the individual exploration. So providing a means and opportunity for each person to experience it themselves. So if that's a question, like say an individual has, then I would be advising that person during these deep meditative states, during these out of bodies, lucid dreams, that they're making that intention. I want to experience more of this, to have better understanding of this. So again, it's not something that we would want to define for you.
Right. You're just showing them that it exists, and for
Right.
you to be the explorer, to go out there and you tell us what you come back and
Right.
find.
And you
Right.
explore, you decide what it means to you.
Right.
Not, we don't have any dogma. Our only dogma that we ask you to believe, you don't even have to, is that you're more than your physical body. That's the only dogma that we have.
Right. So whether it be energy or whatever that is linking us,
Yeah.
you're more than that. And this is all, there's so much evidence of that. And we have, like I said, we've had Angela Ford on the channel, we've had Paul H. Smith on the channel, and a lot of people in the world of psychic research.
Mhm.
So, it's very interesting. The proof is there. And the thing about the Monroe Institute is you've actually done a lot of studies into this for so long. Like there's levels of different states you put. Like, explain to me the different levels. Like, what is a focus 10, for example?
Okay. So Bob did map this out based on the experiences of explorers. And so we do think of it as a map of consciousness. And so focus 10, the one that we would introduce you to in the beginning, is body awake, sorry, mind awake, body asleep. And so it's a very powerful training tool because it helps you get into those very deep meditative states, literally body asleep with your mind alert. So why is that important? Well, it's important because when you get in those deep states, you have trained yourself to stay awake, to stay conscious. We have all of these experiences. You've had out of bodies, you've had lucid dreams, you've had, whatever you can name, you've had it. You just don't, you're not consciously aware of it sometimes, and some of us break through that and become consciously aware. So that's a focus 10.
But there are more because that they're stuck and now there's like a focus 12. Like is there a focus 11 or is there something before focus 10 or
Yeah, there is a
what are
focus
those stages?
11. So Bob picked out certain stages based on, how the experiences were working together. So it doesn't go like we don't go 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. We go 10 to 12 to 15, 21, and then 27. And the hierarchy of it is not important. Now, when you have numbers, that's what you think. Well, 27 must be better
Must
than
be the best.
right. But it's purpose driven. So it's about the purpose. So that's why that focus 10 is a very powerful focus level because of what I've already said. Bob Monroe, that was his favorite. He used it for his out of body, to launch his out of body experiences. So
The
the
focus.
state of expanded awareness. And so the way I like to think about that one is that it's the total self. So Bob Monroe didn't call it the higher self because he felt like total self was more encompassing of it. Because when you have the total self, that could be aspects of yourself in other lifetimes, if you believe in that. It could be aspects of yourself when you were younger, so it's encompassing more of that you. So your soul, basically. And so with the focus 12 level, you're tapping more into that. You're toning down the physical, and then you are tapping more into what is typical, like a dream-like experience where communication tends to be nonverbal. And so a lot of times you're going to get symbols and things that you have to decipher. But again, it's tapping into that communication with the higher self or the inner child or other aspects of yourself is the way I like to look at it.
And then the other one I saw was the focus 15. And this is now where we're going to get into a little more kind of esoteric thinking, right? Like what
Mhm.
is a focus 15?
So focus 15 is the focus level of no time. And when we say that, it doesn't mean that it's not saying time doesn't exist because that's really hard for us to wrap our head around.
Right.
Instead, it's looking at it like time can be manipulated in different ways. So it might be that you're experiencing time and it feels like you've been doing something for 2 minutes, but it's been 5 hours, or vice versa. It felt like it was going on forever and it was 10 minutes. And then there's another aspect of it in that it's past, future, present. So we can, step into all those different experiences by visiting this focus level, which is it's one that you typically initiate, and that means you have some type of intention or activity using your imagination usually to get it started, or it can be the void, the place of deep stillness and silence.
When you're in these states, let's talk about, what would be the benefit to entering these states? Let's stick with 15 because that sounds the most cool so far.
Well,
So
so
let's talk.
let's step back though to subconscious mind. So one,
Okay.
I think it's very powerful that you are opening up a channel, a two-way communication with your subconscious mind, so that you can start experiencing what's going on there. And that's very healing to do so because it helps you understand better what's driving you, why it's driving you. And it's usually not very painful. Like it's not like it doesn't have to be painful to grow or to heal. And then with Focus 15, a lot of times when I'm in the Focus 15 state, I'm working on integrating my entire soul, like my soul. So maybe it's from this lifetime when I've had aspects of myself leave or separate because of trauma, or maybe it's a past life, or maybe it's a future life that's, coming to visit. And so it's just a way to integrate all of that.
It does it sound a lot like, expanding consciousness, being, attuned to all things kind of at one time, being more receptive.
Yep.
And, we hear about this stuff. So in, say, like transcendental meditation or different types of meditation. So we talk about the same things.
Mhm.
But the differences between that and what Gateway is doing or what the Monroe Institute is doing is you're achieving these things through frequency and sound, right?
Well, that's a support mechanism, yes.
Hmm.
But we also during Gateway do some exercise, what we call
Hmm.
exercises, where you're not using the sound technology because you can learn to do it without that support. Because once you experience the territory, then you can go back in there. If you haven't experienced it, it's hard for you to label it and find it. But once you've experienced it, you can. So yes, the sound technology is a conduit for that, but it's not a necessity, to keep it up.
So I've done, reading into this, and you'd be surprised how much you start to hear more and more about binaural beats being mentioned. Because the hardest thing in meditation, when people say, "Oh, I can't meditate," or "I can't, I can't get to that spot of transcendence," they say, oh, you should try using binaural beats.
Hmm. Hmm.
This is something that helps them, almost like an aid, is
Hmm.
exactly what you're saying. That's going to help you get there. And now you like training wheels. You maybe can take that off and you don't need it anymore because you're able to, how to reach that state. You've been guided there. But the fact is that those binaural beats are so powerful and the frequencies, and then that is kind of the magic of Monroe Institute. So tell us about frequencies and how the binaural beats were discovered and what that is, and because even our body are frequencies, right? Like we resonate a certain hertz, right?
Right,
So tell
right.
us the importance of that and how that was discovered.
So Bob Monroe actually hired two scientists early on, and one of them was Tom Campbell, who wrote The Theory of Everything, My Big Toe. I don't know if you're familiar with
Oh
him.
yeah. Hmm.
And then the other scientist, not as well known, Dennis Mitterich. And so one time, Dennis was reading some of the journals, scientific journals, and he came across an article written about binaural beat phenomena. And it was found by a German scientist in the 1800s. And it was a phenomena where you could hear one frequency in one, well, you wouldn't hear it because it's not audible. There'd be one frequency coming in one ear, another frequency coming in another. The brain, you can just simplistically think of it as the brain being the third ear, who's trying to make sense of it all, and then it becomes aligned with that whatever that hertz is. So in current day, we put, let's say, 104 in one ear and we put 100 in another ear, then the brain's subtracting the difference and it's 4 hertz. And so then the brain is more likely to be entrained to go to 4 hertz. And that's how it helps people meditate and get into those deep states, plus stay there.
Let me try to see if I can simplify this a little bit by what you're saying. So it sounds like what's happening is the brain is hearing two frequencies and creating a third frequency. So
Mm-hmm.
it's hearing one at like, you're listening to one at like 440 hertz, the
Hmm.
other at 444, and
Hmm.
what the result of that is now you're starting to hear 4 hertz, right?
Hmm. And it
And
can't be past, like it has to be within a range of 20, so you wouldn't do 100 and 130 because the range is 30, and the binaural beat impact doesn't, or effect doesn't it tends to not be as effective after 20, the separation of 20.
See, everyone has to really pay attention to this because there's real science behind this. Even the way you just described it right there. I mean, there's been so much research done into these binaural beats, and it's just not at random. I've
Right,
listened to them before, and it really is it's kind of when you first do it, it's strange. You've never heard something like this, but your mind just feels like it's at peace. It just
right.
unlocked something in between both ears. So it is an amazing thing in that if someone hasn't ever tried it, they should go and discover this and try it out for yourself. So now let's get into why that matters. So why does the hertz matter? Because when they say you're in a different states, like in alpha wave state, right? When you're in deep meditation, you reach this alpha wave state, and this is also the state where you reach in hypnosis. So if you're
Hmm.
in hypnosis, and that's a area of your brain where you can make commands to the
Hmm.
subconscious.
Right.
So what is it about that hertz that gets you into that wave state?
Well, I mean, it is an entrainment process, so it's just going to help guide you there. And it depends on what's going on in the minute you're trying to do it. It might not guide you there at all. It's if you're really stressed about something going on in the physical world, then it can just, distract from that and it not happen. But if everything's set up right, it doesn't take much for it to be, then it's just an entrainment method leading your brain to a certain formulation. So 4 hertz, let's say. Now, it's much more layered and complicated than that. So when you're doing some of our sound technology, our meditations, it might be that you're in an alpha and then there's a band of theta that shows up and then there's a beta thing that shows up and it's moving all throughout the experience. Again, very purposefully, depending on what is trying to be achieved.
And I looked this up too. So it's between 8 and 14 hertz is the alpha state. So
Hmm.
that's what gets people to that zone. And so when you're introducing people to this and they're getting into that state, is now when you start to try to tell them about get to the focus 10 or the focus 12 or 15. Like,
So
so how does that process work? So take me through it. I'm in. I use binaural beats. I know how to get to my deep state, and then what happens?
Well, so again, it's very complex and layered. So if we're starting an exercise and we're saying, okay, relax, that's going to be a different combination of frequencies. And then we're getting into, okay, now you're in focus 10, then that's a different combination that helps the brain go to that. You can think about it very simplistically. So delta is sleep, right? If you're in deep delta, you're probably in a deep sleep or some layer of sleep. Then being alert is beta, like you and I are mostly in beta right now. We could be in a little alpha too, but mostly in beta. So if focus 10 is more likely pretty heavy on beta and pretty heavy on delta, right? Because it's body asleep, mind alert.
So okay, so is it all about intention? Like, so when should somebody, so you instruct, this is all instructions given before you reach these states, right? Because I would
Yeah.
imagine you're gonna fall out of it. If you talk, now I'm out. Now I got to start
Yeah.
from zero because you just distracted me.
Right. So what we do is we do it. If you come here, if you take one of our virtual programs, even our online program, we'll say, okay, here's the situation. This is what we're about to do. We're about to visit Focus 10. Then you go experience it. And it's usually well guided. So there is Bob's voice, especially if it's Gateway, introducing you to the focus levels, then he's walking you through it. So here you are now in Focus 10. And then you experience Focus 10. Then let's go to Focus 12. Okay, that's the experience of focus 12. Now let's go back to 10 so you can go back there and understand more what that is compared to what 12 is. So, we just help you learn through experience what the different places are.
And I guess I should take it back a little bit too, because I really want to kind of push it home to why people should seek this out and try to bring this in their life. People live stressful lives.
Mhm.
They've got work, they've got family. There's all things that are on their plate.
Mhm.
With the stresses. It comes down to stress and negatively impacting their health. So
Mhm.
What are the benefits and why should someone seek this out and include this and incorporate this as part of their daily routine? Or it doesn't even have to be done daily. Tell me the
Right.
benefits.
So, you can just look at, Google benefits of meditating. So there's that. But when you step into delving into these deeper states of awareness, these different focus levels, you're opening up a doorway of communication. And that's very healing. And I can't tell you how many people have had these experiences that just transform them because it's bringing your attention, your understanding to a different place. So, let's say I had a situation in my childhood that I just had not been able to get over. And then through this meditation experience, I'm shown something. And for an example, there was a lady taking care of her mother. And she was the caregiver, and she described her mother as mean-spirited, and really hard and difficult to live with. She didn't know if she could keep going. She needed some relief. Well, she came to a gateway, and one of her experiences in meditation was she got to see, as an observer, her mother as a young lady. So she's observing her mother being browbeaten, being treated disrespectfully, being all of her dreams dashed. She was observing her go through her 20s and then into her 30s. So it gave her a completely different perspective about her mother. Now, her situation didn't change. She's still the caregiver, but she could look at it from a different perspective and understand why her mother was the way she was because she was beaten and not beaten physically, but, just broken and her dreams shattered because of her life experiences.
So it sounds like that she was kind of given some more empathy.
Right.
And I like that you use the word observer. I had on the show a couple episodes ago. We had this. He's a scientist and a philosopher. His name is James Glatfelder, and he studies consciousness. And he used the same word. He said observer. You
Yeah.
become the observer of yourself. How can you explain that a little bit more? When you say she became the observer, explain how that this would make that happen.
Okay, so in that situation, it's more of she knows that she's in a meditation and she's experiencing a scene like a movie unfolding in front of her, and it's not her life. She's observing another. Now, when you become the observer of your own actions of your own life, that is a very, and that can result with this type of work. That can be very powerful and healing because it changes how you're reacting to things. Bob Monroe called it the Earth life system. And he said, we are very lucky as human beings if we find ourselves here, find ourselves on this earth, in this earth life system, because so many souls want this opportunity because it's the best learning ground that we have available to us because we can, have the emotions of living, which can be awful, which can be very hard, or it can be very good. And as human beings, we've all experienced all sides of that. Some of us have more despair and sadness and than others, but everybody goes through these ups and downs. So if you can become the observer when things are challenging and getting more difficult for you, then you can look at it more as, okay, what can I learn from this? Okay, this too shall pass. I'm just a player in this game, and everything's going to be okay. Whereas if you can't pull yourself out from that perspective or use that perspective, it can really eat you up, and cause you so much harm, emotional harm, physical harm. So it's really a gift to be able to move yourself to be able to do that, and everybody can do that.
But they have to be taught to do it. And this seems like one of the ways that's scientifically proven. A
Yep.
lot of people try these different techniques and the one thing I do like about all this is that not once do you mention you have to go down to Peru and take ayahuasca. Like,
Right.
you
We call ourselves the psychedelics without the psychedelics. But that, so what I love about this is because we all come in with different learning experiences, different needs. So when you do this, the side benefits are what are so amazing. And the side benefit for me was to learn how to be the observer, to learn how to remove judgment in a way I used to be more judging of people, um, to now come from a place of love, even if somebody is doing something terrible, like suing me, let's say. I can look at the situation and go, wow, they're hurting, to have to do this, to have to take this step. And so you can send positivity and love in that direction because you're not taking it personally. You're just saying, hey, they're doing the best they can. And again, those are just side benefits from doing these meditations, visiting these focus levels.
A lot of people, though, they find the Monroe Institute through remote viewing, right? They're curious about
Right.
remote viewing. You learn about Joe McMoneagle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to do what he does.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We have a lot of that.
So how does that all tie in? So, because everything we've been talking about so far has nothing to do with remote viewing. And for everyone that doesn't know what remote viewing is, that is again, that is a technique that the government of or CIA or Department of Intelligence made to learn how to perceive the future, right?
So
Or
it was
spaces in future.
And it wouldn't even have to be future. It could be like locating a submarine, you know. So that would be in real time, and it could also be it can be going to the past. But so what happened is it was at the time when the Russians were creating all of their spies that were that were supposedly psychic spies,
Hmm.
and so the U.S. response was remote viewing, which was different. It was we labeled it differently and. Again, like if you read about Joe McMoneagle or Google him and look at any of the podcasts he's been on, he solved some really challenging problems by being able to locate missing people. He did that in Japan a lot. He also helped look for missing children before. He did locate a submarine that was being built, and they just told him he was crazy. It was no way. It was this big, the movie Red October. It's like that submarine
Yep.
it was being built, but it was being built far enough off land that it sounded crazy to the military that no, the Russians wouldn't be doing that. How would they get it to the water? Well, they built a channel, a very long channel to the water. And yes, it
Right.
was a submarine, and he saw it, he drew it, and so we were aware of it before it became active. So the remote viewers served a very valuable role, and the Tehran hostage situation the remote viewers are what helped save some of those people because they were able to identify all of them without even having pictures of everybody. Some were undercover and had not even clocked in because you don't clock in as undercover agent. And they identified everyone and where they were in the venue, the location.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah,
then Paul H.
powerful
Smith, who
stuff.
we had on too, said that, when he was a trainer of in the Army for remote viewing, and he said, "Oh, the first thing they made me do go down to the Monroe Institute, and they gave me these beats." He didn't really go into it though. He
Yeah.
explained, what were you, how did this,
Well, I'll
so
tell
how
you.
did the connection happen? How does Bob Monroe and Joe McMoneagle, how does this all of a sudden, and Hal Puthoff and everybody, how did it become that the Monroe Institute is known for the place that you go if you want to get the foundation into remote viewing?
So what happened? They got that when they started forming this. Skip Atwater was the person in charge of it. He ended up being the president here at Monroe much later. But they were just trying to figure out how to put all this together. They were learning as they were going, and they learned about this guy Bob Monroe in Virginia that seemed to be able to help people get into these deep meditative states. So when Joe McMoneagle met him, Bob gave him a Focus 10 at the time tape and it cut down Joe's preparation time for a remote viewing session. So Joe was already remote viewing, but it took him like hours to prepare himself to do it. And then it took a lot of space in between each session to clear from the previous session. With the binaural beat support, it cut it down to minutes. And he no longer had to have these requirements of being in a all white room, sterile, with no noise. And so that was a big game changer. And so that's, when they got introduced and Joe started coming down here to take programs and some others did too. It wasn't a huge group of them. It wasn't like they were coming week after week. I think we only had one week that a group of them came together. I found a paper about that where it was the invoice about what it cost, like $2,000 or something like that.
Well, they did. It was also in the movie, The Men Who Stare at Goats. They went to Monroe Institute.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
There was a
yeah,
scene where George Clooney is sitting with the beats on his head,
yeah.
and he's learning.
And they actually, this is a funny story. So Ron Johnson wrote that book. And so he showed up unannounced at the Institute one day, and Skip Atwater was still here as the president. And he said they unannounced, they showed up and they said, "We want to film somebody doing remote viewing." because they were debunking, like they were going around all over the world to debunk people. So they came here and they said that, and Skip said, "Well, sure, y'all can do that, but you're going to be the one to do it." So then he said, "But first, let me take you on a tour." So he took Ron to a lecture hall that we have, and he started just really pointing out details like, here are the tables, here are the chairs, here's the podium. Look around the room, get very familiar with the room. Then he took him to what we call a prep booth, and so it's a semi Faraday cage that he was placed in with the sound technology, with the guy that Skip was at the controls with the microphone, and so Ron was in the prep booth with the microphone, and Skip directs him to start remote viewing. And so, and I'm not sure of how he led up to it, but he reaches a point where he says, "Okay, what I want you to do in your mind's eye, I want you to go check out David Francis Hall." And that was the lecture hall. And he said, "I want you to tell me what I've added to the room and to the front of the room." And so Ron goes through the procedures or the motions, and then he goes, "Well, there is something there that wasn't there before." And he starts describing it. And I've heard this tape. It was a tape that they had recorded the same time that the movie came out, and the I think the powers that be of the movie made them take it down because it wasn't debunking, because Ron clearly described the clown doll that was still in its casing that had been placed at the front of the room. So
Wow.
yeah, so he kept it in as the story goes, he kept it in the book, but the editors made him take it out because it wasn't a debunking. He actually remote viewed. So
Well, I hope somebody does a better another version of that movie someday because
yeah,
I don't know if it was the
but
time that they came out, but it had a lot of stars in it, and they
yeah,
made it a little bit campy, and they
yeah,
could have done a much better job. So I hope that that somebody tries again, and with the popularity of it now with the remote viewing, I think
yeah.
somebody definitely will. So, does visualization have to do anything with this? And the more studies that I do into consciousness, into um, extrasensory perception, all the training, it seems to, no matter what avenue you go, rely so much on a person's ability to visualize.
Okay.
Is that something that you work on there? Is that something that you work on strengthening? What does visualization
No.
have to do there?
So first of all, I want to say we're very big on the imagination. So we encourage you to begin with your imagination. But what does imagination mean? Most people think imagination is seeing something, and it's not necessarily that for each person. Just like and just said, not everybody is strong visually. I'm one of those people. I'm very strong. I'm a clairaudient, so auditory. I receive more from hearing and from kinesthetic feelings. So the language, interestingly enough, in most meditations is visual. They're asking you to see something. So we encourage you to focus on where your strengths are, to open that channel in the easiest way that you can, because it's giving you meaning. And then as you continue your practice, you can you can make it the intention, hey, I want to be more visual. Yeah, I'd like to go in that direction. But if that's not your strength, start where your strengths are, and then you can grow the rest of them.
Do you find that there's anybody in particular that does a better job with all of this? So I don't know if you noticed, but I've noticed that it seems like more women are more open to attune to some of this sort of thinking and perception and feeling this, and men seem to just want to immediately shut off and say that's not real, and before they even start it, it give a million reasons why not to even try. So
Yeah.
have you noticed any attributes? Give us the breakdown. You must have some studies there that you say. I'll ask you what I asked Angela Ford. Do women make better remote viewers?
You know, I would say that this is one place that is not the case, that it really we see an equal number of men and women coming through. And if you are more analytical, some of you that are might have more challenges because of that overactive mind or evaluation of what's happening that can interfere. So then that's a different way to help you train, to help you to say, going back to that observer. idea. It's like you say, okay, that analytical mind, while this is going on, I want you to sit right here on my shoulder. I want you to pay attention because you're going to ask me questions later. And that's great because without you, I can't figure out what just happened. So I need you, but I need you not to be talking to me or, questioning as the experience is unfolding. We don't, I personally would say, from my own experience, I haven't seen any difference between male and female. And I haven't seen any difference between like, are males or females more visual or auditory. So I don't think it's divided that way.
Okay, we're getting the diplomatic answer
Yeah. Yeah.
today.
I really don't think it is. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Well, you know what? I really enjoy talking to you. Where should someone start? If they want to start, should they, first off, is it more worth it to go there in person? If they want to go there in person, like I feel like I would learn more in person.
Yeah.
And there's kind of that nostalgia thing of being able to go, oh my God, this is where Bob Monroe was.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Robert Monroe.
Yeah.
I want to ask you this too. Do you
Yeah.
guys do you do any like 'cause so he had some pretty out there stuff too that he wrote
Right.
about. So
Yeah.
do you go into all the things that he worked on? Because remember, towards the end, he's the one that introduced the concept of reptilians to people. Remember that?
Right, right. Now we don't really go that far into it, but we do go to the I there clusters and that you're just a little small piece of this greater you. So
Uh-huh.
and we have what we call star lines, which is a program that delves more into that. So more of that galactic type
Yes,
experiences.
that's I'm signing up for that one.
Yeah. So yeah, we have it. But back to your question, I have a bias because that's how I started. I came here for Gateway. But I know people like one that just can't come, for whatever reason, whether they live all across, way across the world or finances, because some ways are more expensive than others. You still can experience it even from your own home through online, courses and programs or our Expand app, even. So there's a way to do it that doesn't cost a thing. But if you come here, or if you're in some type of class or group, I do believe that it's a faster process of getting into it and having things evolve.
And then
You
why
don't have to be
shouldn't
in here with
people?
Bob.
Yeah, right. And you get the
Yeah.
Bob effect. So,
And we
but
also changed Bob's house into a venue. So in some of the programs, you would be staying at where Bob lived, like his den,
really.
kitchen. Yeah.
And then that's cool. And then you get Joe McMonahan. Do you guys send out when who's going to be there? Because sometimes you have these people that are kind of very famous
Mhm.
in this world, with Angela Ford and Joe McMonagle there at the same time. And so you let people know in advance, who the
Well,
trainers
so
will be.
it'll be right. It's on the schedule that's on the website. It'll tell you if it's a Joe, and if it's remote viewing, Joe's probably there. Yeah,
Wow. So you get to work with him one on one, the
yeah.
Joe
And Angela
McMonagle.
is
See?
just a guest speaker, so she'll make like a 2 hour presentation.
So why shouldn't people now you can go online and you just have these videos of binaural beats, right?
Hmm.
And everyone's trying to sell their own version of binaural beats. So we don't know, what is legit and what's not. Can you explain, why people have to go to Monroe and not fall for one of these downloads that you
Well,
pay?
yeah, I would say, one, this is the original founder, and thousands of people have experienced these very complex, layered recipes that we have. A lot of the other stuff that's out there is very flat. It's just like, okay, I'm going to put you in an alpha. I'm going to put you in a theta for the entire time. And it hadn't been tested. Ours has gone through a lot of testing. The other thing is we have evolved also. So we're not just with binaural beats anymore. We now use other modulations in combination with binaural beats, which then help facilitate reaching a gamma state. And with binaural beats, there's a little bit of a limitation. It doesn't mean you can't get to a gamma state with binaural beats, but it's not a brain entrainment. Just when I was telling you that once you get past 20, separation of 20, it doesn't work. Well, gamma is 30 to 100 and uh, over 100. So it's a different modulation that needs to be used with binaural beats to help you get to those gamma states. And the gamma states are the epiphanies, where you're hyper focused, like an Olympic athlete can get to gamma and shoot that target or hit that mark. And so when you're having these experiences in meditation, it can be very profound.
Wow. And that's something we didn't even get to is how this can affect somebody performance wise, being able to get to the zone as they call it, get you to that state faster. So it's also interesting. I really appreciate you coming on today, Alan. Where should we send people if they want to find out more about you or more about the Gateway Institute?
So it would be the Monroe Institute, and we have our website,
Monroe.
monroeinstitute.org. And then we also have the Expand app. So if you go to Apple Play or the Apple Store or Google Play, you can, find the Expand app and download it. It's free. There's a part of it that's free if anybody just wants to test it out. And if you pay, you can have access to the focus levels that I've been talking about today.
Awesome.